Well, the South African Football Association haven't been rocked by this scandal that we're talking about at the moment. Kirsten Nematandani, the CEO, has been suspended as well. Some of the other staff having been linked to match fixing. It's alongside a Singaporean betting syndicate. Soccer Analyst Neal Collins with me now on this to bring us up to speed and to get his thoughts on exactly what is going on over at SAFA House. And I'm not even quite sure where to let you go on this one, but first reaction to the news?
My first reaction to the news is no surprise. I was a British journalist when I came over for those friendlies, particularly the Guatemala one in Polokwane. I went up with Deshi Backtower, the goalkeeper who's nearly my age, and we went up to Polokwane and saw this quite unbelievable friendly where the referee kept giving penalties to South Africa and retaking them in case they missed. I remember being on the radio to TalkSport, the radio station in Britain, and saying this is some very dodgy refereeing going on. But there was a feeling then, right, that South Africa had to do anything it could to make that World Cup a success. What had happened was, Gareth, South Africa had forgotten itself in all this. They hadn't organised any pre-World Cup friendlies, and they were the last of all the nations to book their accommodation for the World Cup. It was quite astonishing as you uncovered all this going on. Carlos Alberto Pereira had taken them on all these camps. South Africa were desperate to succeed. Suddenly you find they turned to Wilson Raj Paramal, who, if they'd asked me, I would have told him, I think he was the guy behind switching all the floodlights off at half-time in some of the games I attended in England, kind of mid-2000s. 2004, 2005, there were a lot of games where the floodlights went off and the game was abandoned and they had to play it on another day. And he was betting on those games being called off. Then they get hold of him and he says to them, I'll organise you 4 friendlies, Thailand, Guatemala, Colombia was another one, Bulgaria I think was another one. I won't charge you anything, I'll sort the ref, and to, you know, SAFA at that time had so much on their plate, they said, yep, fine. The game that some people are talking about today is there was a Denmark game at the Trichdale Stadium, Lucas Maripa Stadium. That wasn't part of this. Those 4 friendlies, I went to 2 of those, were shocking. They were simply there to bolster the South African team. So I don't think that Kirsten and his 4 mates were involved in match fixing. They were involved in taking a shortcut to get South Africa some decent friendlies. The opposition weren't trying too hard. Guatemala, they just had an earthquake just before they got here. I remember speaking to their coach when after they lost 5-0.
Yeah, it's an ongoing investigation, Neil. I understand what you're saying, but in the end, despite that, the CEO is ultimately responsible for this, and there is an investigation going to be put together.
Kirsten's the fall guy.
He's going to be the fall guy.
Gareth, we both. Well, I know that Kirsten was the compromise candidate between Irving Koza and Danny Jordan. Okay, Kirsten will now take the fall for this. Even though I don't think South Africa fixed any matches, they simply played these games. The referee fixed the matches. FIFA said quite clearly, unlike the Asiagate scandal in Zimbabwe, where players were deeply involved, coaches and journalists were deeply involved in fixing games to make money. That's what match fixing really is. I think South Africa went into these games. They didn't care too much about the ref. They didn't care too much as long as they got a good result out of it. Paramal was making 1.3 million out of each game from his betting syndicates. He knew what the result was going to be.
What needs to happen here, Neil, is what I'm trying to get at now. These are very serious allegations, regardless of who might be involved. You have the senior SAFA officials all on suspension at the moment, an investigation coming up. What do you want to see happen? What needs to be taking place here to fix this?
Well, fortunately, since all this happened, Wilson Paramal has been caught in London, living under an assumed name. He's now been charged. We didn't know any of this in 2010. Remember that. Paramal's real kind of match-fixing allegations, 5 different football associations in his mobile phone and referees from all over the world. A lot of this has come out. South Africa went into this naively. I'm not one at this point for cracking the whip on these, like they did in Asiagate with Zimbabwe, where there's people getting life bans and all these bans. 1, the players aren't to blame. 2, there was a naivety involved by SAFA. 3, it's history now, and those friendlies, if anyone was cheating, it was the side South Africa was playing, the Colombians and the Guatemalans. I don't think that the South Africans need such a hard whipping over this one. Just be a bit more organised, get it together a bit.
All right, ignorance is bliss or ignorance is to blame. We'll wait to see what happens. All right, Neil, as always, a huge pleasure talking to you. Thanks for coming in.